Today, I am going to be talking about stress and well-being. And one of the reasons why I chose this topic is, of course, that today with the coronavirus and so forth, that there's more uncertainty in the world. And along with that uncertainty is more stress. So I thought it would be a pertinent, timely topic. The first point that I want to get into is the fact that people react differently to the same situation. We tend to think that the way we look at the world, the way we react, the way we judge things, and so forth, is real, that there's really no other way. So it's important that, first of all, you might say, develop a little doubt about the solidity of how we judge things, how we see things. That in a way, when you're experiencing stress, it's an indication that you need to change inside. The usual approach is that I need to change my outer circumstances. It's outer circumstances that are causing the stress. That I need to get a different job. I need to take a vacation right now. Maybe I need to go to one of those spas that they have advertised, where they have a beautiful person laying on their back with these nice little round stones placed on the back. It just looks wonderful. And maybe you need a new partner. Maybe you need to change your diet. There's umpteen different ways that you can try to reduce stress by changing your outer circumstances. But a really good story that I found on the internet quite a few years ago really kind of sums up a lot about stress. And the story went this way, that a teacher, probably in Psych 101, picked up a glass of water one day and held it up and asked her students, how heavy is this? And, everyone gave a different answer about how heavy they thought it was. And she said, what makes it heavy is how long you hold on to the glass. The longer you hold on to the glass, the heavier it gets. It gets to be the point where it's unbearable and your muscles are jerking, but you're still holding on to it. And the point is that all you have to do is put it down and let go of it. And so a lot of stress can be worked with successfully just by letting go. And if that isn't Buddhist, I don't know what is. That's why we meditate, is to learn how to let go of thoughts after they arise. And that also indicates that if you're stressed out, maybe just meditating more on a regular basis could be beneficial. It really is about letting go rather than holding on to things. I remember attending a talk. This would have been in the late 90s. by Khandro Rinpoche, who's an Nyingma Rinpoche. And she was giving a teaching, and all of a sudden she just stopped. And this was totally off topic. She said, you Westerners can hold on to things for 10, 20, 30 years. And I think that we could add, some people will hold on for things for 50, 60, for a whole lifetime. And the point being that the past is past. That you can't change the past. It's done, over with, gone. And our thoughts about it are just plain creations about what has happened in the past. And they're not even accurate recreations of what has happened in the past. I remember, I think this would have been probably 1964. I was in college. Maybe my age is showing. But there was a Japanese movie that was quite popular, at least at the college. It was later made into a movie, a Western movie called The Outrage. I think it starred Paul Newman. But the plot was that you had, of course, this beautiful young woman that was married to a man with high status, maybe nobility, was Japanese. And they were traveling, out in a remote area, and they were held up by a bandit. And it ended up that the bandit killed the husband and had sex with the woman. And so then there was a trial. And so they had the woman give her version of what happened. They had the bandit give his version of what happened. They brought a shaman in that contacted the spirit of the dead man who gave his testimony. And then at the end, a man that happened to be there cutting firewood that saw the whole thing gave his testimony. And it went like this. The nobleman fought bravely to protect his wife, but could not, you might say, subdue the bandit. After the bandit killed her husband, the woman fought off bravely the man that was making sexual advances towards her. And the bandit, of course, from his point of view, he was very brave and noble too. I can't remember exactly what was said, what he said about himself. And then the woodsman gave his testimony, and all of them made fools of themselves. The woman welcomed the bandit sexually. The man that was her husband was a coward. The bandit wasn't all that brave either. He was kind of a bungling bandit. But everybody had their own version of what was going on. And the point is, when we look back on the past, it's our version of what was going on. And we frequently play the victim. That somehow or another, we've been wrong, we've been misunderstood. It's all somebody else's fault. They're just, as one young man told me this a few years ago, They're just toying with my emotions. So it's really important to kind of have a certain amount of doubt about our version of what's going on and why we're stressed out, and to look within for solutions. Now, the next point I want to talk about is worrying. That it's so easy to worry. And most things that we worry about never happen, first of all. Boy, if they did, our life would be a catastrophe. But most things that we worry about don't happen. And then here is my question. There's so many things out there that are uncertain that you can't worry about everything. You can't worry about what's going to happen to everybody. So where do you draw the line about worrying? How do you prioritize that I'm going to worry about this, but I'm not going to worry about that? You just don't have enough time in your life to worry about everything. And so it's really good to look in and at least contemplate this. Shanti Deva said something like this: if you can do something about it, why be unhappy? And I'm going to put in there, you could substitute worry. If you can't do something about it, why be unhappy or worry about it? So realize there is a lot of things that are beyond our control. And worrying doesn't help anything unless you want more stress in your life. If you want more stress in your life, then yeah, go ahead and worry. But it's amazing how our mind works, is that something crops up and we kind of tend to see that this is negative, that this is going the wrong direction. And so if this happens the way I'm interpreting it, then that will happen, which is even more negative. And if that happens, then this worse outcome is going to happen. And if that worse outcome happens, then, I might as well jump off a bridge, because if my whole life is going to be in shambles, it'll be nothing. And you're worrying about things that are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 steps removed from what's actually happening. So if you're going to worry, be mindful, be present, rather than worrying about what could happen in the future. And realizing what you can control and what you can't control. And of course, what we can control, or at least learn how to control somewhat, is our mind. If we are really worried about the future, then we need to pay attention to our behavior in the present, because it is our behavior in the present that influences to a high degree what we will experience in the future, especially what we're going to experience in our next life or next lives. Think about it this way. Do you want to take all of these negative patterns of worrying and stress and so forth into your next life and then just do it all over again for another 70, 80 years? I hope not. That we can learn to kind of take responsibility for our own mind and to train our mind. And so in terms of what we worry about, it's good to have an awareness of our mental habits. Like things like, well, how often do you worry during the day? And what do you worry about? And how realistic it is. I know a lot of people won't fly, or if they do fly, they're afraid of flying. They might even have to take some kind of a tranquilizer or sedative when they fly. Yet they have no trouble driving. And I didn't look this up recently, but I remember hearing a while ago that you are 10 times more likely to die driving than flying in a commercial plane. But somehow or other, people don't seem to worry about driving like they do flying. In other words, it's good to have more perspective, clarity about what's going on in our lives, what we're getting stressed out about, and so forth. And then along with that, this I touched on a little bit, and that is that the past is gone. The past can't change. And we have habitual patterns that were formed in the past, frequently about a past that was difficult at some point or another. And we hold on to that pain, we hold on to the patterns, the mental patterns that we developed at that stage in our life, and act like it's still happening. Many people have a wounded 12-year-old child inside that gets out and influences their decisions and the way they look at life and so forth. And it's fine to recognize that wounded child, maybe comfort that wounded child, but realize that this is not who you are. You're not a wounded child anymore. The human realm, which we are all in, is kind of defined by a poverty mentality. This is the suffering of the human realm. Constant wanting, searching for happiness, constant dissatisfaction. It reminds me of a story going back to a child. I have a son, and he would go to the refrigerator. They get very hungry at about 16. I know I was. Open up the refrigerator and it's full. Mom, there's nothing to eat. And what it meant was there wasn't what he wanted to eat in the refrigerator. And as adults, we can take that approach to life too. This isn't what I want, even though there's an abundance out there, but it's not the abundance I want. That this poverty mentality means that we see what we don't have, and we don't see what we do have. And so we're constantly wanting what we don't have and not appreciating and enjoying what we do have. And so we seek external happiness, which is always temporary. It can never last. But on the other hand, if you're not happy before you get what you want, you will not be happy after you get what you want, at least not for very long. Again, the happiness doesn't last when it's external. And so here is a comparison that I like to use. My grandmother was born in 1896 down by Madison. And she was born to a farm family. And the house that I live in was built about that same time. I don't know if Grandma lived in a newer house for her time or if it was an older house that her parents bought. But she had a lot of older brothers, so even if it was a newer house, it still would have been older than mine by at least maybe 15, 20 years. So when I bought this house, it was in a way, as they say on eBay, original condition. That there had been a few improvements, like they had put a bathroom in the pantry in 1949, but there was still a wood stove for cooking in the house. There had never been anything more modern than a wood stove. And there were 3 electrical circuits. One was for the electric hot water heater. And then the other 2 circuits was a 15 amp fuse and a 20 amp fuse. And that ran the water pump for the well. It went electricity to the barn and other outbuildings, and then the house. If you wanted to make brew a coffee pot, it's not going to happen unless you turn off the pump or something. One of the first things I did was go and buy boxes of fuses. So there was originally no insulation. The windows had no weather stripping on them. The windows didn't even have those latches on top that you turn and it pulls the bottom and the top sash together. The windows operated, there were pins on the sashes, and so you pulled the pins and then raised it and then put the pins out and they fall in a hole, and that would hold it that way. Let's put it this way. When the wind blew in the wintertime, just go in the coldest room of the house and you knew which direction the wind was coming from. There were openings to a chimney in every room of the house downstairs, and doors, of course, in all the rooms. And so they just heated the rooms that were being used. Again, no insulation in the ceiling. Some had been added later, but it was woefully inadequate. But I had heard stories from people out here that grew up in that kind of a situation, and you would have the bowl and pitcher of water in your room for washing up because there was no bathroom. And you get up in the morning, and some mornings there would be ice in that water pitcher. So that's how cold it could be in a house like that. And my grandmother spoke fondly of growing up like that. And of course, no cars. She talked about her older brother's teams of horses when they were courting, how they wouldn't let their team of horses used for farm work. They wanted them to be prancing to impress both the women and probably the guys too, and so on. And it was perhaps very hard work, but she was happy. And now we can be in much, much more comfortable circumstances. My thermostat is Wi-Fi. I've got an LP furnace. I have a guy come out once a year, and very seldom do I for service to make sure it's ready for the winter. And I usually don't have to call him a second time for a problem. Same thing with the plumbing. It's been decades since I've had anyone work on the well and the pump, and so on and so forth. And it's quite toasty in the house. You see, I got my arm bare here and no problem. And it's a windy day today here. So the point is that we can get so unhappy when things become just a little bit uncomfortable. And how big a deal is it really? I know there was a book that came out, I think it was in the 90s, and it was called Don't Sweat the Little Things. And the subtitle was, It's All Little. And in terms of Buddhism, this life is little compared to the billions of previous lives that we have had and the billions of future lives that we will have until we become enlightened. This particular life is like a blink of the eye. And we get so stressed out when things aren't going our way. And we act like this is it. We've got one shot. And if we're not happy, what do you do? But this can help us get some perspective, both in terms of looking at the way our ancestors lived. And you know, the Tibetans lived in tents. The Plains Indians lived in tents in the wintertime. You can go back further than an 1800s house. You can go back to living in a tent. And again, from what I have heard from people like Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche and other of these older Tibetans, is that it worked. People were happy. And the amazing thing is that you can have an extended family living in a tent all winter long, and they were still friends when spring came around. And here we have a hard time getting together at Christmas time with our family. So it's a matter of perspective. Now, here are some remedies. The first one is mindfulness. Focus on what you're doing now. Experience it fully and completely. Be with what you are doing. Not about your thoughts about what you're doing, because pretty quickly when you are lost in thoughts, you're not even thinking about what you're doing. It's called a train of thoughts. you have the first thought about what you're doing, and then there's the next thought which reminds you of what you're doing, and then that reminds you of something else and something else and something else. And pretty soon you are in who knows where, totally, you might say, spaced out, thinking about nothing that has anything to do with the task at hand. Sometimes we're thinking about painful times. If only, shoulda, coulda, woulda, and so forth. Sometimes we're just, what would I say? It's just thoughts, and it's a fantasy. Might be happy thoughts. If you really look at it closely, well, here's something that I did a long time ago. This was way back in the late 80s. And for the first time in my life, I decided to keep a diary. You know, at the end of the day, write down what the important thoughts were that I was having for that day. And I don't know, maybe I did it for a month, maybe two. And then I went back and read it. And A, it was a soap opera. B, every day was a repeat, a rerun, basically. And so maybe you might benefit from that, getting to know your personal soap opera. Maybe you could write a book and become famous. But anyway, it's really important to get to know ourselves, know our soap opera. Sometimes it's called monkey mind. To get to know ourselves and kind of look at it with a light touch or a sense of humor, instead of going, oh crap, I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, yada, yada, yada. That's just more of the soap opera. But look at it with a light touch and kind of laugh at yourself that you were taking these things seriously. That's really helpful, is to have that light touch and that sense of humor. And so investigate, how do these thoughts make you feel? Do they make you feel happy? Do they make you feel stressed out? Do they make you worry? Do they make you feel depressed, down, and so forth? Again, get to know yourself. This is part of mindfulness. But along with that, then, it really helps when you realize that you are thinking and lost in thoughts, to come back to what you're doing. Just let go of the thoughts and come back to what you're doing. It's a bit like meditation, where when you realize you're thinking, you come back to your breath. When you realize that you're thinking, come back to what you're doing. And this is especially important with thoughts that cause worry, that are frightening thoughts, angry thoughts, thoughts of attachment and grasping, any of these conflicting emotions, to get to know that this is part of your makeup, your habitual patterns of thinking, but to then let go of them. Again, rather than beating yourself up for having these thoughts, is just, well, it's just a thought. When I first came to Buddhism and started meditating and started paying attention, being mindful of these thoughts, I was literally just coming off of a very strong antidepressant. And my form of depression was partially anger towards myself. And so I started paying attention to these thoughts, and started, you might say, laughing at them instead of taking them seriously. And well, that's an opinion. And seriously, well, this is an opinion, but I don't have to buy it. I say this, that make friends with yourself, but realize, and we have lots of different voices inside of us. There's a reason why some people have what's called a split personality. That sometimes they'll actually manifest like this person with maybe even a different name. Another time they'll manifest as that person. Well, we all have this inside of us, but it isn't that obvious. I talked to a forensic psychiatrist about this. And that's what he said, that this is one of the current theories about the split personality disorder. It's just more of an extreme view of what's inside of all of us. But anyway, getting back to making friends with what's going on inside of yourself and taking it with a light touch. When I was becoming aware of this, a friend of mine came over. I don't think he even knew I was involved in Buddhism at this time. He certainly wasn't a Buddhist, but he brought with him this printout that he thought was just really funny and had to share with me. And it said, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And in small letters at the bottom, the management. And I thought, yes, that is this depressive self of mine, this depressed manager that I've got inside of me. And it put a smile on my face, and I hung it up on my bulletin board. And, after maybe beating myself up for a day or two or three, eventually I would see that little sign and I would kind of chuckle and let go of it. But more than one person came over and visited me and read that sign and looked at me and said, "You live alone." But I've got a manager. We all have that manager. So the point is that we make friends with ourselves, but realize sometimes our friends give us bad advice and we don't have to follow it. We've got independence. So the next point, the first one was mindfulness. The second is to appreciate what we have. Again, this is a story about kids, children. So it's Christmas time, and the parents, maybe you, decorated the Christmas tree and put underneath it all these Christmas presents for everybody. And then the children, I don't know, some people open the presents at night, some open the next morning, but when it's time to open them, the children come into the room and they're just delighted to see all these presents. And so all the presents get opened. The children, they open one present, look at it, put it aside, open another, look at it, put it aside, another, put it aside. And then when all the presents have been opened, they look at the parents and say, "Is that all?" And we can be a lot like that. We actually are a lot like grown-up children, or children in grown-up bodies. Maybe that's a good way to put it. I remember a guard in the prison that I worked at. He once told me, "This is adult daycare." So anyway, so we are surrounded by people, by experiences, by things to appreciate. Again, if we are mindful and if we look deeply, that there is so much to appreciate in life, that the news is full of bad things happening day after day after day. And it can really be depressing and it can affect us in that way. But the reason why it's news is because it's unusual. And also because it's bad. This is how you get viewership. You do have some feel-good stories, especially at Christmas time, but overall, it is basically bad news. And it's important to realize that this is just news, and there's a lot of good things happening all the time, all over the world. It can be as simple as just being outside and enjoying the outdoors. This time of year, I like to be inside and enjoy the outdoors through a window. But there is so much out there to enjoy. This morning, we had a very, very strong wind, and there was a very light snowfall overnight with very small flakes. It was cold snow. None of these big, beautiful flakes. These were just more like ice crystals. But the wind, when it would come up, would pick this up, and you would have this small cloud of ice crystals swirling around outside the window, which was quite beautiful. Now, a lot of people might think, oh, I don't want to be out in that, or, oh, I've got to shovel snow, or I'd rather be in Florida, or anything, but this is beautiful. But if you really look deeply, it's beautiful. And I was inside. It wasn't cold. And in fact, up here, I was talking to a man last week or the week before that. He and his son were going on a Boy Scout weekend where they were going to do cold weather camping. And I think they were planning on making an igloo or two. Yeah, so, you know, maybe that's not for me. Maybe that isn't for you. But you don't have to look at winter and cold weather and snow as just, oh, that is just one way of looking at it. And, you know, this goes for anything that we experience. It's so easy to think that this is ordinary, this isn't important, I don't want to deal with it, I don't want to look at it deeply. But we are constantly surrounded by beauty, even if it's ugly beauty. So if we are mindful, we can see a lot to appreciate. And that leads to gratitude. And gratitude is kind of being thankful. If you look around, you realize the people in the stores are there to help you. That when they plow the snow, they are helping you. In the summertime, when you're in a hurry on the interstate and they're doing road repair and there's a traffic jam, they're doing this to help you, so you don't have so many potholes. And it's so easy to go the other direction instead of gratitude, to impatience and anger and frustration. That people all over the world are helping us. People all over the world are making things that we go to the store and buy and consume. It somewhat amazes me how, and I've talked to clerks in the store, how sometimes the customers give them a hard time when these clerks their job is to collect money from you so that you can get out of the store with what you want. Or I have been in the hospital recently for a number of things. As you can see, they released me. But in this one admission room, they had a sign that said something to the effect that violence towards the staff is unacceptable. And that right now, people, and this may have happened before COVID too, but people come in, they're in pain and so forth, and they get upset to the point of being violent. I don't know how much of it has to do with you've got to wear a mask, and I don't want to wear a mask, but I spent an overnight stay in the hospital. I had a new pacemaker put in, and I couldn't sleep. And so I did a lot of pacing in the hallways. And at one point, I came across two staff members, probably nurses, but I don't know. I didn't ask them, what is it that you do? And they were talking to each other about being afraid to go into this one room because the patient was aggressive. I mean, it's, we want to avoid, what would I say, becoming angry and aggressive and frustrated when we're out in public and people are trying to help us, even though it might not seem like they're trying to help us, that they're giving us a hard time. But when you're in a hurry, very quickly that speed translates into frustration and irritation, and then angry when you can't go at the speed you want to go, whether it be getting through the store or driving on the highway. I live out in an area where there is no 5 o'clock rush. The closest town is a mile to a mile and a half away, and it has a population of 273. If they all got in their cars at 5 o'clock, there still would not be a rush on a 2-lane highway. But I get into the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and I'm not saying it's a perpetual rush, traffic jam, but I have been a number of them. And what always helps me is to realize that instead of thinking that I have got caught in a traffic jam, I am part of the traffic jam. That all these other people are just like me, and they're all trying to get somewhere at the same time on the same road. And if you can take that attitude, that kind of at least mentally diffuses your irritation and your anger. That we're not separate, we're part of. So appreciate what other people do for you. It's endless what other people do for us. The Karmapa says the whole world is working for us. And then the next one is contentment. And the Karmapa says that this contentment is a great source of natural wealth. To be contented about what we have done. We may not have done it perfectly. I've yet to do anything perfectly. But if we did a good job and are content with it, then well-being will naturally arise. It's that simple. But you need mindfulness for that contentment to arise. And it's good to leave what happens at work if you can, rather than take it home with you and worry about it. If you have to take it home, then don't let it eat up your whole life off of work. You might say delegate some time for it and then drop it. And then there is perspective. And I've touched on that already, but just to go over it again, that understanding impermanence, that life is unpredictable, that things change, that life is too short to squander on little things. And this is why we practice, is to help us get a better understanding of this, the unpredictability of life, and being able to work with it in a constructive way. And what happens otherwise is that we overfocus. We'll take something little and blow it way out of proportion and just spend huge amount of time focusing on it. I like the example of a bee in a phone booth. So you're in the phone booth. Now, this goes way back. It's hard to find a phone booth these days. But you're in a phone booth. You're in a very small space, and there's a bee buzzing around, and you're worried about him stinging you. And you can even get to the point of panic trying to get out. But then you want to be more like a bee that you're in an auditorium with. There's a lot of space there. And you're not so concerned about that bee because it's further away. And so that bee is these little things in life that we get so irritated about, that we need to get out of our box. And ideally, it would be being a bee with a bee in a vast plain of flowers, where this is where bees are. And it's no problem. So finally, the last point is having a positive outlook on life. That to remember that everybody wants to be happy. The people that you are encountering during your day or evening, they want to be happy also. And the Karmapa says, this is kind of a paraphrasing, that positive thinking is easier than negative thinking. That positive thinking is actually a method to generate more well-being for yourself. That it allows you to bounce back quickly from adversity. Whereas negative thinking makes things worse. So what's important, he says, to kind of lean into the positive, even if it might be a little bit unrealistic. He also says that other people warn him, oh, if you just think positively, you're not going to see about, you're going to miss all these bad things that are going to happen to you. And he says, well, lean to the positive. Well, I have one more thing that I would like to say. And it's kind of a saying that I have developed, partially about the house that I live in, because I've been here for 51 years and I've done a lot of maintenance on it. And the saying is, because of impermanence, maintenance is permanent. And this has to do with any of our belongings, our house, our car, our relationships. And also, it's good. I wish that maybe meditation is a bit like this. It's a bit like cleaning up your hard drive. Meditate and just let go of the thoughts that come up, the scary thoughts, the frightening thoughts, the thoughts that we are really attached to, that are really juicy. Just kind of learn to let go of them. When they come up, just let go of them. And so meditation, in a way, is a type of maintenance. Maintaining, you might say, a calm, contented outlook on life.